Everybody. Carolyn Freyer-Jones here. So nice to see you. I'm about to let you in on something that is only taught inside the CFJ Coaching Success School. However, I think this is something that is so important and so valuable. I want you to have it because I think all coaches should have this as something to utilize. So get ready though. This is top secret. This has never before been shared outside of the school. So remember, school's been going on now. We're starting our 5th year. So no one outside the school has seen this unless they've gotten access to it from maybe one of my faculty members or maybe, some coach who's in the school who coaches coaches. And I have never shared it outside the school. So are you ready? This is, ta-da, the gap conversation. Now you may be asking yourself, what the heck is the gap conversation? So the gap conversation originated with Steve Chandler, who is sometimes called the godfather of coaching, but he doesn't really like that. So we just call him the Steve Chandler. And then Ron Wilder, another great coach. And they have talked about like if someone doesn't invest in coaching, then they are stuck with what we would call their default future. So the gap conversation takes it a step further, and it really helps a coach to create a conversation where someone gets to look at their current life. Okay. So let's say you're a coach, you can be a new coach, a more seasoned coach, and you're like, well, how, what's another way I can have an enrollment conversation? What's a way to do that with someone versus just diving in and coaching someone on something? Great question. So, this is another way to have that conversation. Okay. So, I'm going to set the stage up a little bit. I am showing you how I might do this on Zoom. However, I have done this live with someone in my office. I have done this in a conference room. So the first thing you absolutely need is some kind of, this is my daughter's art pad, but I'm going to show you a blank page. You need some kind of sketch pad or blank pad. So ignore the art. That would be blank. Or you need a whiteboard. You could do it with a whiteboard on Zoom, or you could do it with a whiteboard behind you, or if you're standing in your office or a conference room, you need a whiteboard. Like I say to coaches, whiteboards are magic. Every coach should own a whiteboard. Why? Because writing stuff on a whiteboard is magical. When I step into a room with Steve Chandler or Nancy Klein, who I currently do work with, although she never writes on a whiteboard, but she does other amazing things. But Steve Chandler writes my name on a whiteboard and starts writing stuff, magic happens. So you as the coach want to have a whiteboard. And at a minimum, every time you are doing a session or an enrollment conversation with someone, you want their name at the top of that whiteboard or on that pad, right? So now I am going to show you, I'm going to have an imaginary person come to meet with me, and I'm going to do a gap conversation. So you're going to get to see exactly what this looks like. And then you can take it and start to practice it. So whether you are brand new, just got your first client, or whether you are well down the road, but you've never used the gap conversation, I just invite you to start to experiment with this because it can be a game changer, both for the coach in terms of a fantastic tool and also for the person that you are sitting with and serving. So are you ready? All right, let's go. First, I'm going to make up the name of the person that is going to have a conversation with me. I don't know, just for fun, let's call them Steve. You like Steve, right? Steve Chandler. Hello. All right. So here is Steve, and he is coming to meet with me. Ta-da! Look, there's his name on my pad. Hey, Steve, how are you doing today? Steve might go, I'm doing okay, great. And I say, okay, so I want to talk to you about the conversation we're having today. So would it be okay with you if I establish some context? And Steve says, sure, that would be great. And I say, excellent. So let me set context for today. First of all, we're going to be having a very different kind of conversation, maybe different than any kind you've ever had before. And Steve goes, oh, okay. And I say, now, what I mean by that is this is not a conversation where we're chatting and just hanging out in having light conversation, right? I'm a professional coach. So my job is to basically, it's kind of like a doctor. My job is to poke around and see either where it hurts or where the opportunities are. So can you hear that? And Steve says, sure. Yeah, that's really helpful. I say, okay. So to set the stage for this conversation today, do I have permission to poke around? Steve's like, sure, that's totally fine. And then I say, will you tell me if I poke in a way that's just too much for you? Steve says, well, I doubt that's going to happen, but yes, I'll let you know if something is too much for me. And I say, fantastic. Thank you so much. And then I say, just so I know, have you ever done any kind of personal growth work before, whether it's therapy or coaching or personal growth workshops? And he says, I've done some work with a therapist. I've never worked with a coach, and I've never really done any workshops. And I say, great. Okay, that's really helpful. How was the work you did in therapy? And he says, well, it was good. I mean, I got value. I don't really know how it differs between coaching and therapy. And I say, oh, that's actually a great thing to slow down on. Would it be okay with you? And I'll share a little bit. He says, yeah, that would be great. I say, so listen, the distinction that I make between therapy and coaching is therapy is largely, but not exclusively, about healing from the past. Not exclusive. Some therapists do great work about like what's coming, but this is largely. And then coaching is largely, but not exclusively, about creating your future. Okay. That's the main distinction. And there are lots of coaches that will go back and handle stuff in the past if it's getting in the way. I do that kind of work because I have a master's in spiritual psychology. So that's part of the work that I do. And it really varies from coach to coach. And creating your future is really the number one thing that coaches are up to. Steve's like, that was so helpful, right? Because Steve's, he's a really ideal kind of prospective client. So every time I'm Steve, but I might throw in some zingers. So be prepared, okay? Because I'm going to sidebar every so often. So I'm showing you the gap conversation, and then I'm going to sidebar. We're going to pause the action, and I'm going to tell you something about what's happening with me and Steve. All right. So I say, Steve, so what I would like to do today is really take a look at your life. And we're going to zoom way out. So we're going to get altitude on your life and what's happening. Okay. And I'm going to divide your life up, if it's okay with you. I've already made them into like these, excuse me. I'm sorry, Steve, you couldn't really see there, into these islands. I'm not going to tell you about island B yet. We're going to focus mostly on island A for the moment. Is that okay with you? So island A, if I get my directions right, island A is your current life. So some people call them islands. Some people like to call them your pies. So here's your current pie. Here's a different pie we're going to talk about soon. So pie, if you like pie, do you like pie, Steve? Steve's like, of course I like pie. What are you thinking? I'm in a human body. I like pie. Great. So we can call this a pie, or we can call this an island. You get to choose. I want pie. Great. I want pie too, but we'll have pie later. All right. So here's the island. Oh, I'm sorry. Pie of your life, current. And what we're going to do right now is build out the current pie. So I'm going to ask you some questions. All right. And I'm going to take some notes. I'm going to put this down for a minute, but I'm going to be taking notes while we talk. So tell me like what your current pie consists of. Like, what are you up to these days? Right. Like, I just want to know. And Steve says, well, I have a slice called work, right? I'm a banker. Oh, you're a banker. I think I knew that. You're in financial services, right? Yeah, I'm a banker. I'm actually a VP. Um, and I've been with my current organization for about 15 years. Oh, wow, that's quite some time there. Is that How is that for you? Like, are you liking the organization? Well, like it. I mean, I think there's great things about it, and there's things that I think could be better. And I'm like, okay, is that okay? I'm gonna make a little note, like could be better. All right. So could be better. I really hear you. Okay, so we're gonna keep moving, but we might come back to that. We'll see. All right, so let's do another piece of the pie. So tell me what other pieces. Are you have a partner, married, kids? Um, and Steve says, yes, I have two kids. They are 7 and 13, and I am married to a woman named uh, Mirabella. Wow, Mirabella. That's quite a name. I haven't heard the name Mirabella. I don't know if I've ever heard it. That's so cool. Like, I'll ask you more about Mirabella later. So you're married, you have two kids, you have a 7-year-old and a 13-year-old. Wow, that's quite a big age range. Um, how's family life? Like, we're gonna call this family life. How would you say, how is your family life? And Steve's like, well, I'm not around that much. Oh, he's like, that's part of it. Like, I travel a lot for work. I'm often away during the week, and a lot of times I'm home on the weekends, and I'm tired, and I'm not really game to do many kind of family life things. Oh wow, how is that for them? Steve says, not great. Mirabella's not that thrilled about it. Okay. Note to self, i.e., me, the coach. All right, so we're starting to get a picture, right? There's stuff brewing called lots of not at home time, and family is not, it's not really working for them. Maybe it's kind of like Tom Brady and Giselle. I don't know. Just saying. Okay. So, all right, so we know family life. So note not home. Okay. Now I want to say, what else? Like, do you have health and wellness? Do you like take care of yourself? And she's like, oh no, I'm really like my fitness. I'm a triathlete. I'm out on my bike or doing something almost 5 days a week, if not six. Love that. I ride with a crew. It's one of my greatest joys in life. And I say, great. So that sounds really, is that kind of where most of your friends are outside of work? Absolutely. So would you say you have your friendship life is satisfying? And he says, yeah, it actually is. That's actually a real bright spot. Okay, so friends, right? Bright spot. Okay, so here I am. I am filling out, and as you can see, my handwriting is not like gorgeous and spectacular. And some of you have gorgeous and spectacular handwriting. Extra points for you, not for me. And I'm just building out his pie, right? So that's what I'm doing. I'm building out his pie of his current life. Pie A. So then I'm going to ask him some more questions. I'm going to be like, so tell me a little bit about, do you have a spiritual practice by chance or anything like you do for your inner life? And Steve kind of looks at me like, inner life? And I go, okay. So he's like, I mean, I was raised in the Protestant church, but I don't really do anything. And I say, okay, is spiritual practice something that you're thinking about? And he says, not really. And I say, okay. So I'm just going to put like spiritual practice just on there. Now I'm going to pause, right? Because I'm going to talk to you, the coach. So for those of you that have, let's call it some kind of training or background that you're like, oh, I really want to help people on the spiritual level, right? So remember, I have a master's degree in spiritual psychology from the University of Santa Monica. Um, Steve Chandler, myself, and Michelle Bauman developed the Soul Centered Professional Coaching Program for the University of Santa Monica, and we taught it. And often, what came up, now this program was only for grads of the University of Santa Monica's 2 years master's program. And often, people who graduated from USM like really wanted to help people cultivate a deeper spiritual life. And one of the things we would say to them is, you can't inflict a spiritual life on someone who's not seeking it, right? So, for those of you that have like a spiritual orientation that you're so excited to share in your coaching, it's great. And you could limit your practice to only people seeking that. And that could make your practice potentially at the beginning pretty small. So, that's something you want to look at, right? Like, I don't ever make it a requirement. Like, I know how to convert rather than a spiritual practice. If someone isn't interested in that and they don't want to talk about things like God or the universe or spirit, I will start to talk to them about, what is your context for life? And they look at me like, what do you mean? And I say, well, do you have a learning context for life? Do you have a punitive context for life? Do you have a, Steve Chandler used to say this, like, life sucks, then you die context for life? And that helps. So then I'm willing to coach someone into creating a new context in their life. And it does not have to ever use any spiritual words. So that's just a sidebar, another sidebar for you. Okay, back to the gap conversation. So remember, your job in this conversation, I just shook the camera, I apologize. Your job in this conversation is to build out his pie of life, right? So maybe there would be other things like a hobby. One time I did the gap conversation and I made the person's hobby race car driving. So maybe Steve likes to race car drive in addition to being a triathlete, which really takes him away a lot because he's constantly like at the track practicing his race car driving, right? So race car driving. And he also really loves like creating floral arrangements. He's very dimensional, Steve. He's really in touch with his feminine side. He's in touch with his masculine side. So between race car driving and floral arranging, his family maybe they're getting the short end of the stick. So I'm going to come back to that later because my job as the coach is to be like parking the things I might want to come back to and do some coaching around, right? So I'm thinking about all this as I'm writing. So I'm not doing a lot of coaching right now. Have you noticed that? I'm information gathering. So this is my first real conversation with Steve. I'm information gathering, I'm connecting, I'm getting to know him, and we're putting his life up on the whiteboard. That's what we're doing. People love it. If they've never had this with them before, done with them before, they love it. So just know that. So we're going to build it out, right? Maybe there's who knows what else is in his pie, right? It could be anything. Like, but you want to know what to ask. Family, health and wellness, spiritual practice, um, friendship, creative endeavors, right? Maybe someone has service in their life. Someone might say to me, you know what? One of the things I love to do is I volunteer, and I volunteer once a week at a food bank. And that's like something I love, and I want to get my children involved in that. Okay. So I'm going to put volunteering, right? Okay. So you're going to build it out. You're building out the pie. Your job is to get as much of the pie A built out, right? You don't want to leave a bunch of blank spots, right? So you want to make sure, is there anything else? So I might say to Steve, hey, is there anything else that goes in your current life now? And he thinks and he goes, I don't know, really like Netflix. I mean, I love Netflix. A huge fan of what's that show again? I love that show. Oh, Squid Games. I love Squid Games. Like I think that's the best. And I say, oh wow, that's so cool. Do you watch Squid Games with your family? He's like, my wife and I, that's actually something we really like to do together. Oh, okay. I'll put Netflix up there. No one's ever really told me that's like a piece of pie, but it's all good. I'm going to put what he says, right? Netflix. And then he says to me, and I also have this very rare collection of books that I collect. So sometimes I'm spending time on the internet looking for these special books. And I say, what are the special books? And he said, I collect like old Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys books. And I'm like, wow, that's so cool. I loved them as a kid. So I'm going to put that. So we know he's spending time on his computer. I'm like, do you share the books with your kids? And he's like, no, they're really rare. I don't want them touching them. And I said, okay, I'd love to see them, but I hear you. They're special. So now we have fully like pumped out pie A. So I'm going to say to Steve, this is fantastic. Like you did a great job. Really, like this is so fantastic. Do you see? Like this is your life. This is your current life. This is a day in your life or a week. And he says, yeah. And I say, so listen, the next job that we're going to do, we're going to build out pie B. And you know what pie B is? Pie B is life the way you always wished it would be. It's like, what is the life that you're yearning for that currently is not happening? Or the life maybe you dreamed about, but haven't yet had, like, it hasn't come forward yet. It is not materialized, right? So we're going to spend some time on pie B, which is life. It's your ideal life. Let's just say that, right? It's shorter. Your ideal life. We're going to talk about that. And can I ask you a couple of quick questions though? They're not that quick, so let me clarify. I want to ask a question because I noticed something. I noticed that when you said work could be better, and then you talked about how your family life, like you're not around much. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about that? Okay. So right there, sidebar, coaches, do you hear me? I am saying, do you hear? Like I want to do a little delving. right? I want to pick one or two areas to find out more about that are like the flags that are going off. Like, wow, this guy's got some red flags going on, right? And he goes, yeah, I'm willing to share. So like there was a reorg at work, and my new boss is not particularly interested in family time, and certainly doesn't create that as an important part of the team, like in terms of how we do that. And we're just like to the max, and we're meeting in different cities every week to grow the business. And my family is really getting hit because then I come home and I'm tired and I want to go do race car driving or flower arranging or my triathlete stuff. And then Mirabella gets really frustrated. And I say to him, it's, can I offer something? And he says, yeah. I say, it sounds like it's not really working well. He says, it's not. It's really not. I haven't wanted to say that out loud, but it's not. And I say, okay, so I want to do a little bit of coaching around this. And we are, but I want to ask you some questions first. Is that okay? Now, sidebar, I'm asking a lot of permission. Do you hear that? Like I'm constantly saying, may I ask you some questions? Would it be okay with you? May I offer something? You can never ask too much permission, particularly in an early enrollment conversation, right? Especially if someone's never been exposed to coaching. I'm, I'm not just poking around without permission, right? Now, some coaches may not do that, and that's fine, but I'm just sharing that as an option, right? This is about learning to experiment with different muscles when you're in a conversation with someone. So, this is one I invite you, especially if you're on the newer end or if you're more seasoned and you've just gone away from asking permission when you're with someone new. It can be great to practice again. Okay. So, I'm going to say to Steve, hey, what would family life the way you want it to be? What would that look like? Are you able to put a moment in that and imagine it? He says, yeah, I'd be home, easily by 6 p.m. every night. I would not be fried. I would not be traveling as much. Like if I'm traveling, I'd be traveling maybe 3 nights a month, maybe. And those other nights I'm home and we have dinner together and we hang out. Maybe we play a game or watch a show together or we go outside. I don't know, but we're together. And maybe I'm making dinner or I'm ordering in for us. And my family is feeling like they're getting really good parts of me versus like really sloppy, measly leftovers that are like overheated in the microwave. And I say, wow, that's amazing that you can articulate what you would want. Are you okay if I write it up here? And he says, yeah, put it up there. So then I'm building out his life the way he wants it to be. Okay. So I'm like home by 6, hanging out. Maybe he's cooking, etc. I go, fantastic. And I say, have you ever shared with Mirabella your vision that this is something you want? He says, no, because we're both kind of grumpy with each other and she's just pissed. And I'm sort of like, I can't do anything about it. And I say, you might want to say to her, I want you to know something. I know it's not happening, but I want you to know this matters to me. Like, here's my vision. And he goes, I never thought about that. I never thought about telling her my vision. Said, yeah, because it might give her some hope. She might be like, oh, he does care. He does want something different. So pause, moment of coaching, moment of offering, right? So, like, because remember, people are going to pay us because something happens when they're with us, something new that they've never thought about, some new way of seeing things, right? So, we don't want to leave that outside. We want to pick some key places to offer something, to ask a great question. So, we're not just like hurrying to build out the pies, we're also pausing because now I want to say something. That means that it may get messy. You may get deep into coaching him on his current family life or his relationship with his wife. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, I only have 20 minutes left. I have to build out this. It happens. You are in charge of the time. It is your job to manage the time. And it might happen and it's okay. So, again, especially as you're getting used to doing this, it may get a little wobbly or wonky. It's all okay. You'll get better at it the more you do it. So stay with me. Okay. So I want to be like, wow, that's amazing. Right. And then I want to say, okay, so what else would life be like the way you always wished it would be? He goes, well, my wife and I would have some alone time. I love my kids, but we need time. I say, I don't disagree, Steve. So we build that out. Like, what would happen? I'd say, well, we'd have a date night every 2 weeks, and we'd go away alone uh, every 3 months. And I'm like, that's amazing. Well, how did you come up with that? And he goes, well, I saw this thing. I don't know. I was scrolling through Instagram and I saw this thing about like what's ideal. And I don't know, in a marriage. And I stopped and I looked at it and they said date night every 2 weeks, away alone, at least for a night every 3 months, and then every 2 years away for like a week or two. I'm like, I love that. I'm going to use that. Thanks, Steve. Okay. So what else? Where we get like, I want to hear what your ideal scene is, Steve, for work. And he says, honestly, I think I'm going to have to leave the organization. I do not think the current culture is changing anytime soon. I don't think my boss, I don't think he's even interested in creating a work culture where people have more opportunities to thrive in their personal life. So I say, okay, are you open to some thoughts on that? And then he says, yes. And I say, have you ever talked about this with him? Well, first of all, let me ask you a different question. How are you doing in terms of your own producing at work? And he says, I'm a star, like new business developer. Like I'm the highest rated on the team. And I say, so Steve, I got to be frank with you. If you're the highest rated on the team, you have way more leverage that you're not using. He's like, what do you mean? And I say, well, if I was the highest rated on the team, you can be darn sure I at least would be slowing it down and having a conversation with my boss about what's happening, not like sharing personally, but like what I'd have some requests for him. Are you familiar with the idea of how to make requests? And he says, well, I don't know, maybe. I said, well, what are you not doing right now? He's like, I don't make any requests. I said, exactly. But what if you could make a compelling request? And he said, that would be really interesting to me. I said, okay, so let's come back to that. So I'm going to put work needs like it would be, you shared it like home, you're working more, you're not traveling as much. There'd be more freedom maybe to make different choices. Are you liking the work itself? And he says, I love the work. It's just too much of it. And I say, okay, all right. So I make some notes. I say, great, we're going to come back to that. And then I'm going to go, okay, what else? And he says, well, I'd do like the triathlon in Fiji that's coming up. I'd be able to do that in 2025. And I'm like, triathlon 2025, Fiji. I said, you have to like qualify? He said, I have to qualify. It's not a small trip. And I said, maybe that could be one of the trips with your wife. And then you get to do both. He said, that would be amazing. I said, that is something to worth like creating for yourself. He's like, I would love that. It's okay. I say, Steve, can I ask you? This is going to sound very different. So bear with me. I want to know what your inner life is like. And he says, I don't really know what you mean. I go, well, if I was going to take a film crew, but the film crew is actually able to be placed inside your body and I could hear all your thoughts. If I watched a whole day of your inner thoughts and the way you talk to yourself, would I be listening to like a beautiful, inspiring movie? Would I be listening to like Nightmare on Elm Street, like someone who's always like, you're bad, you're wrong, I'm gonna kill you, you're a loser, or some variation on there? Like, what would the soundtrack of your inner experience day to day be like? I said, well, that's a great question. I don't know if I even notice it. I mean, I don't know. And then I pause and I say, wow, you don't know? And he says, I don't know. I don't know if I have, I guess I don't even know. I mean, I have thoughts about work, but I don't even know. I say, are you curious about that? Because it's interesting to me that your answer is, I don't know. He says, yeah, because when I was a kid, I like loved to sit and be with myself and think. And I had all these fun thoughts and I had ideas. And it was just like, I felt like it was kind of like now that you're talking about it, it was like I was in like this cool amusement park where there was always some fun ride. I was thinking about it, what I was going to do when I grew up and all these things. And now I don't even feel like I'm numb. And so then I am going to put like over here, right? I'm going to be like numb inside. Numb, numb inside, numb inside. Now, for me, that's a gold mine, right? Because I'm all about, I mean, I love helping people create change on the outer, but the inner game is where it's at, right? It's like the way they talk about it at the University of Santa Monica is there's the goal line of life, jobs, houses, trips, and then there's the soul line of life. Like, how am I being with myself? What's my inner life like? How do I experience life? Does life, am I walking through a field of joy? Am I walking through a field of like um traps that are painful and that like my thoughts are weapons that I use against myself? That's to me the gold of coaching, right? Some people call it, there's the chess board of life, and then there's the chess player who I'm being, right? So I want to be like, wow. And I say, Steve, what would you, would one of the things you would want to be back in touch with your inner creativity and your inner sense of possibility? And he's like, yes. And tears start to roll down his eyes. Tears. Steve is crying. And I'm like, I want to pause here. I really get that he's like, this is really uncomfortable. I had no idea this is what would happen in this conversation. Bingo. Great gap conversation happening over here with Carolyn and Steve. And I'm like, I really hear you. So we put like the opposite of numb is what? Alive, vital, conscious, aware. So I put all those words there. Alive, vital, conscious. And maybe joy. Is joy fit for you, Steve? He's like, yes, joy, fun. He's like, gosh, I haven't thought about those words in so long. Joy, fun, great. Okay. Now we have struck gold, people. Coaches, we have struck gold. Now, of course, I'm going to build out everything else he wants because he told me he wants a puppy and he told me like just a couple other things, but like this is everything, this inner part. So I'm going to build it out. Now I'm looking at the timer. I'm watching over like on my Zoom screen. I'm like, oh, wow, we have 15 minutes left. And I'm like, wow, Steve, we only have about 15 minutes left for today. And I just want to slow down here and go, so what are you like, what are you noticing? What are you noticing? And he's like, crap, what am I not noticing? He's like, woo, my island, my pie B and my pie A and pie B, big differences. I said, yeah. So can I show you something, Steve? And he's, yeah. I go, look, I want to show you. So I'm going to build out, first of all, let's imagine his pie has been built out. All right. And I'm going to go, so listen, I want you to look at something. Here's life now, and here's life the way you would like it to be. You see that? It's like, yeah, I'm like, that's the gap. So there's a gap between where your life is now and where you want it to be. And he says, yeah, I see that. And I say, so here's the deal. You're a triathlete, right? He goes, yeah. I go, and how did you get to be able to compete in a triathlon? He goes, I had to strengthen myself. I had to do stuff. I said, exactly. To get from here to here, this is where the work is. That's what I do. So when I coach someone, I'm partnering with them to go from wherever they are here to go here. And it's like, this is the gap. And my job, if I partner with someone, if I choose to, is to help them get from here to here. And another way to say it is like, if this were islands, right? It's like there's the water. And in a way, the coach is the boat. I'm the boat that gets you from island A to island B. If we're talking pies, let's say this is like, I don't know, where do pies sit in? I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about that one. But this is it. So this is the work. Do you see the work in here? Anything that's got whatever created life now not is not going to be what gets you to life in pie B. It's just not. There's going to be new muscles. You're going to need new ways of seeing and new ways of experimenting. And he's like, I get it because I know what it takes to become a triathlete. And I say, so really the question is this the work you want to do? Are you up for that? Or are you okay? Because some people are kind of realize in this process, like, you know, I'm good with pie A. I mean, it's not B, but I'm not really there on wanting to do the work. And he's like, oh, no, no, no. I have to do the work. Now that I see this, there's no unseeing it. Like, what is this going to take? And I say, well, let's do this. I'm going to recommend that we have another conversation, that we don't even talk about what the work would look like yet with us, because we've done a little bit of coaching, but we haven't really done full on coaching. And I want you to have that experience. And I want to see what happens when we do that. And I am more than willing to have like a real conversation about what the partnering would look like. But we need to put more time on the calendar. Are you game for that? And this again, this is complimentary. We may be done. Maybe we'll do so much work that we don't even need to keep going. And he's like, well, I don't know about that. I might need a lot of work. I'm like, it's okay. Let's just start with another conversation. He says, great. And I say, okay, get out your calendar. We did it. Ta-da. Gap conversation, people. So for those of you that are more in corporate work, you may be going, but that doesn't land. I have done gap conversations for an organization. So here's the current state of the organization. Here's the way we'd like the organization to be. It can work for an organization, a small business. You could even do one for an entire family. So the gap conversation can be used in a variety of ways. And it can be an excellent tool, like something to sink your teeth into as a coach, to give you some framework to help someone see their life. Obviously, a really important thing is you need to create context at the beginning. So if you saw this right at the beginning, I was like, can we create context for our time together? Did you notice that? And I said, this is going to be different than any other kind of conversation you've had. So you can't just be like, okay, island A, island B, let's go. Got to create context. Okay. And if you're a coach and you are already have been working in the business for a while, but you're like, I'm not really making the kind of money I want to be making, I encourage you, use the gap conversation. Start making that your initial way of having a conversation. See how it works. I have coaches who come to the CFJ Coaching Success School. They're like, I already have a way. And I say, are you making the kind of money you want to be making? And they say, no. And I go, are you willing to practice the gap? You can always dump it later. But there's things that occur in using the gap that can change the way someone sees their life. New things can emerge that you might not see otherwise as the coach. So I invite you, if you're watching this video, to practice, to be like, I'm taking it on. Use a nice whiteboard. I've seen people who make it like there's advanced versions of the gap, but we'll start today with just this is like the basic gap. But you could do maybe you think I'm Carolyn, I got you. I'm better at you than I'm way better. I'm not going to do islands, and I'm definitely not going to do pie because I don't eat pie. Like I'm sugar free, dairy free, all those things. I am going to do um 2 gardens, right? You could do gardens. You could do what are other things so that you could have? You could have, I don't know. I don't know people, but you can come up with something, but it has to work the same way. Okay. So you have to be able to build it out. And I want you to know something, a couple other tips before we complete. Sometimes people are so heavily into their life the way it is now and victimhood that when you try to have them look at what island B or pie B could be, they can't. They keep collapsing into current life and how difficult it is or what's not working there. And if that keeps happening for me, if I'm like, well, let's talk about what you'd like it to be like, and I try that a few ways and they cannot do it, I say, let's pause. I want to ask you something. And I say, so I'm having this experience. I don't know if you're noticing this. I'm having the experience that anytime I attempt to see what you would like it to be like, you're not like we can't go there. And it's I just want to show you, do you see how much you're in life the way it is now and all the ways it's not working to the point where we're not even able to imagine what life could be like. I want to see if you notice that the way I am. And sometimes people go, oh my gosh, oh my God, I'm not able to do any of that. What's wrong with me? Carolyn, please help me. It doesn't always happen. It's rare. But sometimes people still don't know what you mean. They're like, I don't understand. They're so in victimhood, right? So then you as the coach are going to have to find other ways to show them they're not able to see what's possible. They're not able to stretch into possibility. So that happens. So if it does happen, don't think, oh my gosh, I'm doing it wrong. Actually, you want to be like, wait, this person is just really deep in victim, really deep in life happens to me. It doesn't happen for me. And I might even say that, like, you sound like life really just happens to you. They go, it does, doesn't it? Life just happens to me. We can't create life. And I go, well, are you open to a different point of view? So those are some other things to be watchful for. I hope this was helpful. You now have top secret experience of just a taste of what we do in the CFJ Coaching Success School. Because after the coaches learn this, they start practicing it. They come back to class. They're like, this happened and this got messy. What do I do here? And then we expand on it. We go to the advanced gap and much, much more. But I want you to have this. You can always email me, carolynfreyer-jones@gmail.com. If you're like, I tried it, it was a it blew up on me, or I tried it and it was amazing. Most of all, know how glad I am that you're in the profession. Know that when one of us wins, we all win. When one of us does a better job in an enrollment conversation, the whole profession gets better. So thinking about you, take good care.